Every time a state rewrites their evaluation law, my phone just starts buzzing. This month, it's New York, Law 3012E, the STEPS plan. I read the statute this weekend. Most districts will read this as a compliance problem, and I'm going to actually say I think it's an opportunity. Let's talk about what it is and then why I may think it's an opportunity for districts. Here's what's actually in it. Every district has to adopt the STEPS plan, and that plan has to address every single teaching and leadership standard the state has adopted. Not a sample or a sampling, but all of the standards. That's not the part that I necessarily agree with or think is an opportunity. I actually believe that most rubrics can be narrowed down to what we call priority standards in our work with districts. So what I see as an opportunity is that this will require multiple measures of practice, like at no other place and time. One of those measures being direct classroom observation for teachers, and then school visits for principals. Hopefully this law can spur greater action on the parts of school districts to make those observations much richer, much more important, much better than they actually are right now. Also, what's important here is that the rating process has to be transparent before the school year starts. Not just the score itself, but the process. Educators have to be able to see in advance what evidence earns which of the 4 performance level ratings. And that's on every standard, not just be given a number in June, which is really what was at the core of the problem going forward. So that applies for all educators, not just the ones who are struggling. It's all educators get a formal plan for professional growth. And districts have until June of 2032 to fully adopt this law. So understand that this is a real shift on how evaluation law has worked, at least for the last decade, ever since Race to the Top really kind of shifted our work. So here's the part that matters more than the compliance timeline. This law is really about clarity of expectations. We insist on clarity constantly for students, a clear learning target, a rubric that they can see before the lesson starts, or the way in which they lay that out at the beginning of a lesson. We almost never hold the same standard for adults. The rating process has to be transparent before the school year starts. That means that it's more than just the score. Educators can see in advance what evidence is actually going to earn them the level of distinction that is in the performance level indicators or performance levels descriptions. So this is not a new idea for us. It's our first standard of observation and feedback. Evidence has to be tied directly to a clearly defined indicator of practice. And that's what we teach every single observer who works in it. It's not a framework that everybody kind of interprets on their own or in some loose way. It's a behavioralized framework where proficient is described in detail and understood and agreed upon prior to actually implementation, or at least at bare minimum through implementation. So once that clarity exists, the next problem shows up immediately though. A transparent process only works if what's behind the rating can actually hold up when having the conversation with the teacher. Think about what most observations and what most observation evidence ends up looking like after a process, or potentially if you've been involved in an observation, you've received that evidence or feedback. More often than not, it still is remaining to be a checklist with boxes, or or a bulleted list of items that have to be addressed. A note that says engaged with nothing truly underneath it isn't going to suffice in this type of a process. None of that will really survive against this statute. And so it provides us with an opportunity to say, this is a chance for us to increase the level of rigor that is required of the observation and feedback process within our schools. In our first book, we wrote about making sure that there was clarity and that there was depth to that process. And we actually have one particular standard and strategy that really highlights it. Strategy 24, in which we talk about citing qualitative and quantitative evidence and data for every claim that you end up making. So it's a simple habit that most observers don't just build within their purview, and districts aren't necessarily training in that direction. They may be calibrating, they may be putting together sessions in which administrators are coming together to have conversations, but they're not necessarily truly calibrating beyond the rating. So that's the opportunity that is actually hiding within this law, to build a system where evidence behind every rating is strong enough to stand in any conversation with a teacher, heck, right out in the public, in fact, every single time. So this is the whole reason that we have codified our work in the Feed Forward Learning Lab. New York isn't the first state to move in this direction, and it won't be the last. If you want to build the capacity and the system now, not after a deadline forces your hand, subscribe, and touch base with us for a demo, and we'll get to action on making sure your observation and feedback practice can make this happen for you.